Hello, this is Sarah from Reset Revolution. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We will be shortly joined by Leah Malamed and Kai Titcher, and we will be discussing the topic of perceptions of mixed race people, mainly mixed race identity. Some questions we will be touching on will be about Kai's over here, fetishization of mixed race people. Joining us from Australia. So let's see if the Wi-Fi will be fine. And hopefully they'll be on her way. Hi, Kai.
Hi.
So yeah, now we just need to wait for Leah, but then maybe we can already start off by your introduction, maybe. If you could introduce
Okay,
yourself,
yeah,
Kai.
of course. Hi, I'm Kai Titcher. I'm half Japanese, half European Australian. My pronouns are he, him.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, pronouns, very important. And yeah, hopefully Leah will be here. Then maybe how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I think this is a topic worth talking about. That I guess should have more awareness. So I'm glad I can advocate for that.
Maybe I will already start asking you some of these questions. Yeah. Before, yeah. I mean, we are waiting for Leah, but then, so may I first start off with asking you if you have ever experienced any fetishization due to your racial background?
I mean, I guess I have in some ways. There was one time that I've been in a Japanese school and I would be sitting in class and outside the door there'd be just a huddle of people looking in at me, I guess in awe. I guess it sort of made me uncomfortable, I guess being perceived as exotic. And I think it's down to beauty standards, in particular Asian beauty standards. Originally, funnily enough, mixed race was kind of suppressed in media, seen as undesirable, but now it's more desirable to be mixed race. You see it a lot more with marketing now. They use mixed race models, particularly in Asian media. I guess this perception of being exotic because people are mixed is has come through that through being different. And me personally, I've got Asian centric features and Eurocentric features, which I guess are perceived as exotic. This kind of creates a societal pressure that to be perceived as beautiful in a sense, which not everyone necessarily wants to live up to and just does feel pressure to live towards. I guess I remember in last year, there was this TikTok trend that went around called the Ayo Asian Check Challenge. It kind of began as people showcasing how their lives are quite different, but then it kind of turned into people showing off their different features, which I guess it did empower the movement of mixed race becoming more prevalent. However, it kind of contributed to this problem of pressure to be beautiful. So yeah, I guess that's my answer.
Thank you. Leah has just joined the live, so maybe we could pass on that question to Leah as well. But then, yes, portrayal of mixed race people on media is also another topic.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
No worries, Leah.
I was having a few technical difficulties, but everything figured itself out.
Wonderful, wonderful. I was just asking Kai to introduce himself, and then we talked about fetishization. No, I can't even say the word. Fetishization.
Yeah, it's a complicated word.
No, it really is. Yeah, can you start off by introducing yourself, maybe?
So my name is Leah. I'm French and American. So I'm originally from the States, but now I live in France. I'm biracial, so I'm African American from my mother's side and French from my father's side. I'm also of two different religions. So my mom's side is Catholic and my father's side is Jewish. So that's kind of who I am in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, hopefully we could touch on to your kind of your experience as like having a family of different religion, maybe. Then could you talk about maybe your experience with being fetishized for being biracial, perhaps?
So it's kind of funny because in the States, or ironic, mostly not really funny, but in the States, people normally value the fact that I'm French, and it would make, you know, just the fact that I would say like I'm from France would, capture a lot of people's interest, and I'd get a lot of like remarks and things like that. But then when I was here, it was the fact that I was American was more of, what captivated people's attention. So, French, and like when I was in the States, people were like, oh, French people are known to be, attractive, things like that, open, to like sexually and things like that. But then I'd hear the exact same thing about when I was like here in France, when I'd say like I'm American, I'd hear the exact same remarks. So it really made me think that no matter what no matter what race I am in each of the different countries, I would get the same remarks, if that makes sense.
I see. So you felt like people being in different environments, you felt fetishized in different parts of your identity.
Exactly.
I see. That kind of connects to our next question, where I wanted to ask, what are some challenges you feel like you experience as mixed race people? Can we go with Kai first?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I guess a main challenge that I suppose some mixed race people face, and I know I've faced, is how to identify. Because we look different and grow up different from quite a lot of people generally. And I remember asking myself, like, am I Japanese or am I Australian? Like having to pick one essentially. And there feels like this societal pressure to pick which you are. And that also paired with different terms and labels that are associated with mixed race, like hafu, hapa, mutt, halfy, or like mixed, or even blends like Wasian. Those can be quite confusing. Eventually, as I've like grown as a person, I've realized that I'm equally both and neither, which I guess makes me unique. And I've seen this term kind of applied to mixed race people called ethnogenesis, which is basically the formation of ethnic or cultural groups. But then in terms of mixed race people, it's like in finding our identity, we like identify as a fusion of our cultures and become something totally different and unique, which I think is quite special. Another challenge in terms of that, of identifying, is some mixed race people wonder like whether they can identify as POC or not. So you sometimes wonder, like, do I count? Do I not? Is it appropriate or is it inappropriate? Personally, I do identify as a person of color. I can sort of relate to those experiences and that identity.
Yeah, no, the case with POC, because I remember my friends not knowing that Doja Cat was like half black, and her using like the N-word in songs, and people questioning that. But then, like you said before, the fact that you realized that you were both but then you were neither at the same time, I feel like us, like people not knowing what ethnic background people have, like questioning them whether they can identify as one or not, I think that's something that we have to work on as a society, I feel, because I'm sure you face that quite often. Leah, could you talk about your challenges that you've experienced?
So it kind of like overlaps with what Kai just said, but for example, like in the mix of all, the college application things, I'm applying to schools in the US and they ask a lot of questions about race. And I'm always stuck with the same issue that I don't know what to choose, because I'm kind of too light to be African American, but I'm too dark to be like European, like a white European. So I've always had difficulty trying to, like explain where I'm from and where my origins are from, because my grandparents are originally from Haiti and are African American, but they're not
Mhm.
like black African American. So oftentimes when I say that and then people meet my grandparents on my mother's side and my mother, they're like, oh, but she's not black, you know, she's
Mhm.
mixed as well, even though my mom identifies as being African American. So there's a lot of
Mhm.
emphasis, I think, on skin color, and that
Mhm.
kind of dictates, you know, whether or not you can consider yourself something. So, for example, when I say like, "Oh, I'm black" or African American, people are like, "You're not black. Like, you're too light to be black." So it's always that like constant battle of like I can't just give like one answer. It's I always have to go in depth about like
Mhm.
why I identify as African American and
Mm.
explain that like my origins are from Haiti and from Poland. So that's why I'm like a mixed race. And that's why I identify half as white and as black.
Mhm. Mhm. I see. I see.
And something else that is an issue with me is due like to the two different religions that I have. So the Catholic side and then the Jewish side. And so I myself have come to a middle ground where I don't identify at all as any religion. I respect both of my family sides, but me myself, I don't believe in anything. And it's quite it's quite interesting because I feel like when I'm with either side of the family, I need to be extremely cautious about what I say, because if God forbid, you know, like I say something against like Judaism to, you know, my Jewish family, they'll get super, you know, offended. And if I say something against Catholicism with my mother's family, like I'm gonna get, you know, a ton of remarks. So I kind of always have to make sure to not really say anything,
Mhm.
um, because they're both sides of the family strongly believe in each of their religions.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow. Yeah, no, having to worry about what you say, like I really admire you for being cautious about, yeah, the words you speak.
Thank you.
Um, Also, I have another question about. Oh, by the way, any people in any of our viewers watching right now, you could leave your comments down below anytime. I'll be reading out when at the relevant timing. So a question I had was, do you feel that you are treated differently in different communities? And if so, what do you think influences these mindsets? Perhaps Kai?
Yeah. So I guess I've I've noticed in like the different countries I've been in, so Japan and Australia, I fit in differently. You generally, like Leo was saying before, you are like perceived for your differences. Like in Australia, I'm perceived more as Asian, whereas in Japan, I'm perceived more as white, which is really quite interesting, but also conflicting.
Mm-hmm.
I find that in Australia, the treatment is more, I guess, the treatment of mixed race people is more normalized, you know, because we're quite a multicultural nation. It's just become the standard. It's kind of overlooked in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Japan, which is quite a homologous like nation with people with like less diverse backgrounds, I tend to stand out more. Like I was saying with the Japanese school example, when I was there, I just stood out, and people were in awe of how different I was. I think ultimately, to answer your question, culture influences people's mindsets and how they treat people, especially of mixed race. And also age. I've noticed that with certain generations, they'll have different opinions on the mixed race identity.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps older generations sort of considered mixed race to be an abomination or undesired. But whereas newer generations, with this rise in globalization, view it as more of a common thing and something that's going to grow in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Generational, yeah, differences. Leah, do you have anything that
So
you feel?
actually, I feel like when it comes to race, it can either be positive or negative. Um, like for example, I was having this conversation with my boyfriend the other day, and both of my family that lives in France is Jewish. And so when he's also Jewish because he's from Israel. So when he came, to like my sister's bat mitzvah, he was welcomed with open arms, and people really appreciated him because he was Israeli, for example, and Jewish, and could relate to what was going on. And I kind of felt like that was wrong in some sort of way, because if he was of some other religion, he might have been, greeted differently. And I feel like that is just wrong as a society in general, that we, sometimes that just goes to show that we really value people that are similar to us. But also, for example, when I go to the States and I say like I'm French, they find that really cool. So again, there's really that like middle ground and balance between, being part of like a community. I think like, especially with religion, it's kind of different than being like race or kind of like nationalities. I kind of think that that's two different things. That for religion, it's more of like a polarization between people who are like the same and people who are different. Whilst in like, I'm talking about like Western, like I'm only French and American, so I can only relate to those two societies. They kind of find that being different is interesting and cool in some sort of way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it really depends on the culture. Like, for example, I feel like Kai, you would understand, but then, yeah, in Japanese society, I feel like because of like the historical background that kind of suppressed diversity, it kind of, I feel like mixed race people feel more alienated there, just because the culture sometimes has difficulties kind of accepting differences, while as like in America, I used to live there as well, but then people are more open about different cultures. Indeed. I also have a question about, is there anything you want to add on about, perhaps Leah, like your religious background and all that, in terms of how you feel accepted in different communities? Or
so something that's interesting, for example, is that I never, on my mother's side, I never really followed the whole like having a godmother thing and the whole Christian type of kind of ideologies and stuff. And on the Jewish side, I never did not want to do my bat mitzvah, because again, I didn't relate to the fact of like speaking to the Torah and things like that, because again, I identify as, I respect religion, but I don't identify to one. And for example, my whole family did it. My brothers and my sisters did it, and I was frowned upon when it came to my father's family, because they didn't find it normal, whilst my mother was more understanding to the fact that like I if I didn't want to do it, I didn't want to do it. So I think that especially when it comes to religion, since you're ultimately like speaking to a higher power, which is God, people take like rituals and ceremonies so much more importantly, and sometimes blow up the importance of it, and kind of whenever somebody doesn't want to do it, or follow those exact steps, it's almost seen as like an abomination, or like you've betrayed your religion and you've betrayed your family. And like that's definitely what my Jewish side wanted to make me feel. And I was lucky enough to have support from the other side of my family, and I still do not regret the decision, because I honestly didn't think it was fair that I would speak to God if I didn't believe in him, for example. So that's, I think, one of the big major issues when it comes to having two different religions.
Wow, Leah, like, the fact that we're like the same age and then but then yet you go through all of this because yeah, no, my family, like for example in Japan, many people are multi-religious or like they just don't identify as one thing. They like celebrate Christmas, but then they go to Buddhist temples on New Year's Day, and then it's people are very flexible with religion. But then hearing your story, uh-huh, I do learn a lot. Thank you. And also, maybe for Kai, I was wondering. I mean, we didn't discuss this before, but then I was just wondering, what do you feel like? What is like, because in Japanese we have the word hafu, which is like Japanese pronunciation of half. So like half, it refers to mixed race people. But then, what kind of what are you more comfortable being referred to as? Like,
I guess it's, oh, sorry.
no.
I guess it's quite an interesting topic because, like, from mixed race person to mixed race person, everyone's got a different experience and is comfortable with something different. I guess personally, I'm most comfortable now with mixed race. I think that's just a broad umbrella term that covers it all. But then I know like the terms like Wasian to refer to someone that's half white, half Asian. I guess I've known in online communities, I know some people are uncomfortable with that term because it can sometimes be negatively charged. However, I'm like, personally, I'm okay with it, but I don't really identify with it as much anymore. But then also there's the other terms like biracial, which I sometimes go by, or like hafu. I do like, if I'm speaking in Japanese, which I don't do very well, unfortunately, but if I'm identifying myself in Japanese, I'd probably go with hafu. But then again, it has been negatively charged before in a way, and kind of, I don't know, it makes them seem like there's a desired half and maybe a less desired half.
Yeah, no, because Leah, you might be confused about the context, but then some biracial people in Japan feel like the word half, like hafu, makes them feel like there's like a missing part to who they are, and that's why some people prefer calling biracial people like dabu, which is like a Japanese pronunciation of double. So it's like it's not one half and the other half. It's two. You have two sides, and no, it's very interesting. Thank you, Kai. And maybe finally, I have a question about how you envision the future in terms of mixed race identity or mixed race people in society. Yeah, would you like to go first?
Yeah, of course. So again, I can only relate to being like the American and the French side. So, especially in the States now with the whole like Black Lives movements and everything that's going to, progress in the future, I think that there's still a lot to do when it comes to in terms of, like racial equality. Because, again, like I remember one time I was like, oh, I want to participate in the Black Lives Matter movement. And somebody told me like, that's kind of like, like, not like fraud, but, you're not completely Black. So you can't really, understand what it feels like to be, like a Black African American suffering from, society because, you've lived abroad most of your life and you live more like a white person than a Black person. And that really shocked me because it, really just like shows the way that society views, mixed people. Like we don't have, the privilege to believe, or even if we weren't, mixed race, and even if I was completely white and I saw, how African Americans were treated in the United States, and I decided to speak against that, people would come for me and say that I can't understand because I've never lived through something like it myself. So that just really goes to show that, again, there's a huge, like there's a long way to go before we can attain some type of racial equality. I mean, it's an
Mhm.
issue that's been going on for a while, since the beginning of history,
Mhm.
and even more for mixed race people, because again, since we're not exactly one race, you know, we can't exactly identify as one race. We have to identify as two or multiple races.
Mhm.
So we can never completely, you know, identify as one race. Like I can't only identify as being American or French, because then when people will see me, they'll be like, oh, but you know, you speak other languages, you're this and that, like you're not completely
Mhm.
American. So I think that that's mostly how, I don't know how I envision. I just know that there's going to be a lot more, you know, issues regarding race that are gonna be, you know, happening in the near future.
Mhm.
So to see how it goes.
Mhm. Yeah, and having you both to speak about this topic, I also think will like work on like will allow people to work on like you know understanding more about how you identify as in society. And Kai, would you mind um talking about what you envision in the future?
Yeah, I guess first off, I'd like to build off what Leia said. I've certainly experienced that too, where you kind of almost denied your identity in a sense. It's like, oh, you're not Asian enough. Oh, you're not white enough. Or, oh, you're too Asian. You're too white. Like, there's sort of this conflict. And I think it's down to people, I guess, lacking the understanding of what mixed race is and I guess how it works and how people feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, for the future, I think as globalization like continues, mixed race people will become a whole lot more common, and this topic will become more well known. And I think it's good to do things like this forum to, I guess, start conversations about it. And I certainly want to advocate for more support and awareness of mixed race people and mixed race youth, because it can be quite confusing for some people. I know it was for me at a stage, and it can take time to really figure out who you are and what you want to be perceived as. And yeah, I think by taking part in this interview, we can bring awareness to the topic and help other mixed race people be seen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There are certainly more to discuss about mixed race identity. So, yeah, if there are any comments, any questions, please drop them down in the comment section, and yeah, we could answer them now, or we could perhaps do like a part two with, you know, yeah, more other people as well. But is there anything you two want to add on?
I
Or
think that's it for the moment.
mm-hmm.
I guess something worth talking about is like representation in the media of mixed race people
Mm-hmm.
and portrayal. I suppose today, like these days, it's more common for mixed race people to be in the media. I guess slightly like less seen and people are less aware of it, but there's quite a few actually. And I think it's quite good to have that representation to, especially for mixed race youth, to feel seen and understood.
Mm-hmm.
But also in some cases, that's where the fetishization and idolization starts. With these mixed race people in the media, they're perceived as like beautiful and exotic. It kind of makes this standard that the rest of us have to meet of living up to these standards, which isn't always the case. We don't really want to be seen like that. We just want to be considered normal rather than exotic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being pointed out, kind of that is very uncomfortable. But representation definitely has to be discussed more. Mm-hmm. But I feel like yeah, no, we've had like a wonderful conversation now, and thank you so much to both of you for
Thank you
joining.
for having us, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Oh, there's Ayako commenting. Thank you for sharing your stories and thoughts on mixed race identity. It definitely helps hearing from other mixed race about their experiences and are definitely worth being heard.
Thank you, Ayako.
Thank you, Ayako.
Thank you guys, and yes, see you in our next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.